trying to remember repeat questions from people.
Okay.
Can all hear me?
Yeah.
All right. You made it. Last day. Everybody's ready for the big party tonight, right? Should be fun. We promise that it'll be better than last year if you went to last year.
Last year's was good.
Parts of it. There'll be no this. Woo!
Oh, yeah.
Well, there might be as a joke. All right, we've got John, Sarah, and Michael here to talk about Dynamo and large firms, which I'm really interested to hear about because I worked for Stantec. Interesting little history of how people's paths cross. Michael worked for Ad Inc. A decade ago.
Yeah.
So Ad Inc. was acquired by Stantec in 2014, so that is actually where I now call home, even though I wasn't an Ad Incer, I was a Stantecer before that. So it's really funny how our industry is relatively small, right? And you never quite know who you're going to run into, or like, oh, you know those guys? Yeah. So I thought
We
that was
just
kind
did
of,
that.
Yeah, we just learned that. So, anyways, yeah, the stage is yours.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for joining us on the last day. So you made it. Well, this is Beyond the Graph, how to deploy Dynamo in a large firm setting. I'm not going to read this for you. I'll let you absorb all that. But we're going to be talking about Dynamo. We're going to be talking about Dynamo in a big firm. That's kind of the gist of it. A little bit about us. I'm Michael Kilkelly. I'm the founder of ArcSmarter. I write a lot about technology and productivity and do consulting as well. I'm here with Sarah Garthaus, who's with IMEG, and you're the BIM director, firm-wide BIM director in Naperville, Illinois. And then we have John Cook as well, who does research and development for IMEG and has recently moved. You're now a snowbird, right?
I'm a snowbird. I live in Phoenix now. I
So,
got out of Illinois.
Yeah. So real quick, how many of you are using Dynamo in some capacity right now? Okay, good. Yeah. Okay. Now, how many of you are in firms where you've deployed Dynamo at a larger scale? Okay, good. So maybe about half or so. And then just show of hands, like how many of you work for a small firm? I'd say like up to 20 people or so. No, okay. What about up to 50 people? Okay. 100 people? All right, what about like, let's go super big, 500 or more? How many of you are like, all right, so most of you got the whole large firm part in our title, so that's helpful. Now, a little bit about the timeline and how this presentation came to be, and I'm going to go out of chronological order just so we can get the story. Back last year at BILT 2018 that was in St. Louis. So that's where I met John for the first time, and we just happened to cross each other. I think it was in the corridor, and John said, "Hey, Michael, I got some of your Revit macros. They're really helpful. I've converted them to Dynamo." And I'm like, "Oh, that's really cool. I haven't thought of that. That sounds like a good exercise." And he's like, "Yeah, and we rolled it out to our firm, and firm-wide we're running Dynamo." I'm like, "Wow, that's ambitious. Like I haven't heard that either." And I said, "How big's your firm?" And John says,
About 1,000, no biggie.
Right. And what, like 40 plus offices?
40 plus offices.
So like my jaw drops. I'm like, holy shit, like, that's a big firm. So we started talking some more, and I'm like, this is a really good story. I want to hear more about that. But it actually goes on before that, back to BILT 2017, which was Toronto.
Yep.
So I'll let you take that over, Sarah.
So where the story really started for us, a little background about the way IMEG stores its files. Initially, we had these folders on our network. Every person who worked in our company got their own folder. And for reasons that were, I promise you, not nefarious, I found myself in John's private folder and his private stash of Dynamos. So one drink in to the gala at Toronto, I cornered John. I was like, "Hey buddy, found your secret. Do you want to make some more?"
And I said exactly who's asking.
So that's where you guys started with Dynamo. So now to fast forward to 2018, I said, "Oh, I want to hear more. Like, this is a great story." And part of my job through ArcSmarter is I look for stories, like how people are using technology, how they're employing it, and I'm always looking for really good use cases. So I said, I got to talk to you guys some more. Like, I want to hear. Partly it's selfish. Like, I want to learn how you did it, and then partly too, it's like I want to write about this or I want to get this out there because again, I love these kind of stories. So we set up a time to interview, and we had a great conversation, and that became an article on my website, ArcSmarter, which went on, was probably one of the more popular articles that year. And it was great, and I'm like, this, we need to do something else with this article. This is some really good stuff. So we decided, hey, why don't we turn this into a presentation? So that's what we're doing right now. So just to clarify too, like, I have absolutely nothing to do with anything that we're going to show today. I am just the narrator and the moderator. And again, so everything, all the cool stuff that we're going to see, it's all them. All right, so I'm just going to move things along. Now, a few things about IMEG. I'll leave that.
So this is IMEG's headquarters, actually in Rock Island, Illinois. If you've never heard of Rock Island, start in Chicago, drive west until you hit the Mississippi River. That's where you'll find me. We started small, very, very small, but we've grown very quickly. We are currently 1,200 people in about 41 offices across the country.
So a big firm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that qualifies.
And grown very, very quickly is part of the story too.
All right, so a couple things too. When thinking about a large firm, thinking about developing custom tools, Dynamo is not always the thing that comes to mind. There are some issues which we'll talk about, but then there's also a lot of positives about Dynamo, and I think that's why a lot of us have adopted it in the first place. First of all, it's no programming required, right? Like, you can get in there, you're not typing as much, you can get into that, of course, but it's nodes. And there's a lot of already, there's nodes that are out there, there's an open source community. There's a lot that's already there for you to get started. And it's very flexible. So whatever you can do more or less in the Revit API, you can do through Dynamo. So you can build lots and lots of tools like we'll talk about. And one of the other things too, and I think that this has really helped its adoption, is the user community. So you have dynamobim.org, the forum, then you have people who are just developing great content, great node libraries, all that stuff in Dynamo. And I think too, and this is your part, John,
Yeah.
the personal challenge of it, right?
Yeah, everyone has a lot of stuff to do. So back when Dynamo was in its infancy, I was keeping an eye on it.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
That's a little better. And so I started developing these tools that Sarah found that was helping my daily life. So, and that taking, I think the buzzword that I hear a lot at this conference this year was low-hanging fruit. So that's what I was figuring out, and I was using these on the side to speed up my processes to help me survive my daily workflow, which I think everybody can relate to.
Right.
Everybody gets 100 emails a day. Things are going up all over the place. How do I speed stuff up? Right?
Yeah. So there's that personal challenge, like I want to do this, like I need to solve my problems. But the issue with Dynamo is there's Dynamo challenges, like the things that make it easy and the things that make people kind of drawn to it are also part of the problem. So there's really no user interface necessarily. I mean, we'll get into that, but if you're trying to make a tool that you're going to deploy firm-wide and you have a range of experience and you have a range of familiarity and comfort with using tools like that, the fact that you'd have to open up the Dynamo graph, get in there, can be a little bit scary. Then also deploying packages, huge challenge.
Super bummer.
Yeah. And then also providing some sort of centralized access to the script. So we're talking about a 40 office firm. That's a challenge. And again, it's not necessarily built for that kind of use. Also, too, from a large firm perspective, any kind of user data. Like you want to, who's using what? What are your most popular tools? Who are your power users for the scripts that you're creating? You're not going to get that out of the box. And then the last one is the speed or lack thereof. So Dynamo isn't compiled, so if you have really computationally intensive scripts, they're going to take some time to run. So again, just to get a little bit more about Dynamo specifically at IMEG.
Yeah, so we have deployed across all of our offices. We are currently running about 4,000 scripts a month. We do track every person who runs a script. Every script that's run, we receive that data in real time, so we're able to take advantage of that and help it drive training and education. We'll talk a lot about that, so look forward to it. We have currently about 50 scripts in what we call Gen Pop. We send them out to the prison, to our general population users. So that was an inside joke that we have that just took wings, and everybody calls it that now.
I've always been wondering, like, why Gen Pop? And then you're like prison. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, we gotta lock them up, right? So 50 scripts are being run, a variety of what those scripts are going to do. Some of them, they're like sleeper hits. We make them because we're like, oh, this looks fun, let's try this. And then they're huge hits and people use them all the time. We're totally surprised. So it's been really interesting to see which ones are really well received and more popular. But on our backlog, we have a huge amount of scripts that are currently in development, alpha and beta.
Yeah, just because you have 50 scripts in development, or in Gen Pop, is what we call it, doesn't mean you stop. And so once people start using it, they come up with more ideas, which is really cool. So I get probably 5 or 6 emails a day, hey, can Dynamo do this? Or is there a way to do it this way? So we're constantly developing, constantly pushing stuff into beta, which we'll get into, and how we do that. I have a stash of more than 50 scripts in concept phase right now. Some of them may or may not make it out, but at least we're checking it out and seeing if it's worth it.
Yeah, and he pulled his concept phase scripts offline so that I can
That was gonna be my question. Are you going in there and being like, wait, John, what's John up to?
check this out. What's this do?
Yeah.
Let's run it. And he goes right away. He sees the data.
So, one thing real quick, I meant to mention this at the beginning, but the way we envisioned this session going was that it interactive. If you have a question, a comment, at any time, just go for it. Yeah, please.
Just wondering, how were you able to get the live data from?
It's a secret. Sorry. It's not the point.
That's actually, the question was, how are they able to get the live data? And we're gonna talk about that, because that to me,
At the end of the day, it'll be a secret among all of us.
Yeah, there we go. Right. Yeah. But yeah, at this, again, we see this, for me, talking to them, interviewing, writing the article, like, I wanted more information about that, and we had a great conversation. We want to bring that to a larger audience. So, two, anytime you have a question, feel free to ask. We love, this is also for John and Sarah and myself as well, to get more information about what other people are doing. And I'm glad there's actually a lot of large firms here, because I think that's the beauty of conferences like this, where you can get everybody in a room.
Absolutely, and just on the tail end of that, this is our story. I mean, we've just been in the trenches trying to figure this out, and we're very curious to hear what other people have done the same way. So I'm not saying we're giving you all the right answers, we're just giving you our current answer. And so we're looking to, as a group, see how we can push this
Yeah,
forward.
because there's a lot, I mean, there's so many different ways you can do it.
Yeah.
And this is the way.
Part of the beauty
But
of
maybe,
apps, though.
right, exactly, maybe there are some other ways to it as well. So this is kind of the gist of our talk today anyways, is looking at these 5 key steps, as we'll call them. And if you're going to deploy Dynamo, at least talking with John and Sarah, this is kind of, this was my takeaway, this was the thing that I learned the most from. And again, maybe you have 7 steps, maybe we're missing a step in here, but this is what I saw in their story as being the most important part. And we're gonna go through each of these in depth, and you can see, number 4, collect user data. So we're gonna get to that for sure. But to start things off, talking about a development process.
Yeah, so the process was kind of obvious. Who has used a tool that someone has pushed out that has broke?
So, who has written a tool that they've then pushed out and somebody wrote?
Okay.
Yeah.
How many of those people use your tool again? Right?
Yeah.
So we had to put in place a system where concept is above all that. You come up with an idea, you start developing it. But when we start putting it into alpha, that's when we're like starting to put all the nuts and bolts together. Once I feel that, okay, time to move it up, let's test it amongst other people, we move it to beta. And in beta, we have what we consider power users amongst the company. And these guys are not people,
Shy.
they're not shy, let's just put it that way. They're very vocal, and we picked them for certain reasons. And if the script does fail, they're gonna use it again after we make the adjustment. So these guys are just,
And they're gonna tell us about it.
yeah. So you want your power users to actually be vocal. It helps you. You don't always want to hear that a script is great, right? You want to know what's wrong with it, where we can improve. So that this process just happens over and over and over and over again.
I think part of it too, with having a kind of stepped process, it's about managing expectations. So if you say, hey, I have an alpha script or I have a beta script, people know it's probably not going to work 100% of the time. And then if it does, like, then they're pleasantly surprised. But I think that that's part of it. Then you know, once you've been through that, once it goes out to the prison floor, right? The general population, it's good to go. It's been through, it's been fire tested. And then the expectation is obviously going to be a lot higher. But I do think stepping through that, and that was a big takeaway for me, because I'm usually like, it's done, I'm going to roll it out there and see what happens.
Yeah, totally, and when it gets to general population, it's not over there either.
Right.
You might have some ideas generated from that, where you have to do a version 1, 2, 3, 4, and then keep replacing, so that process just keeps, it's a vicious cycle.
So thinking about that, John, do you have a process that you use that moves a script from alpha to beta to gen pop?
Yeah, so within that beta group, we use Teams to communicate in our company. So we have a beta group set up through Teams, so when I'm ready to push something into the beta, I just let that team know, and we usually give like a little write-up for them to test, and then the location, everybody knows where the location of the beta folder is, and then they start using it. And then when I do move to beta, that's where I set in the data to collect, so then we know if it is being used, and if it's not being used, we kind of prod them some more, so.
So that gives you have a good feedback mechanism then as they're moving.
Yeah, and that's how we communicate if it breaks in beta. They just shoot me, hey, something's wrong, let's look at it through Teams.
Yeah. Yeah. So part of that too, though, like having that infrastructure in place for support, that's like, and again, that was a real eye-opener, because it's one thing to build the tool, it's another thing to then have to support it, and then it's another thing when you're supporting it across 40 offices and 1,200 or so people. So can you talk about that, Sarah? Like, how do you, what's your support team look like?
Yeah, as we've grown, we've learned very, very quickly that we need to expand the amount of people who are available to help our Gen Pop, obviously. When we were a small firm, it was really just me. I was full-time, and I was the end of the line for support. It gets really overwhelming when there's 1,200 people trying to get you on the phone. And I'm hard to get on the phone. So it actually, this was deploying all these scripts, increasing the amount of automation that we have in our company was one of the drivers for changing the organization of my group. We promoted 6 individuals. They still support their teams, but now they have more responsibility to supporting our offices, and they're kind of creating a spread out support network for the rest of the company. They're supposed to be experts in Dynamo. We create them subject matter experts in all of their scripts. They do all of our training as well, and that has been a huge help to not only remove some of the burden from me, because I mean that's only a piece of it, but be able to help my people. It's painful, it's frustrating, it's upsetting to have a person who's in trouble and needs help and you just can't get to them. So knowing I have more people with me, it's been a big deal.
Because I think too that often gets overlooked. Like again, I built this thing, and now you want me to support it. Like there's not a lot of joy, like we were talking about in there. Yeah.
So how did you get those people to come to you? Were they automatically just like, we want to know more about Dynamo, or was it something that you had to go out and...
I did. I went out and shopped for them, you know, and tried to give them a little bit of incentive. We gave them, you know, a promotion, a raise, a new title. But I mean, they're all people that have been around a long time. They're passionate about virtual design and BIM. They're like us, you know. 1,200 people, you're going to find at least one other person that you can be like, hey buddy, this is cool, right? Like this is really cool. And it's been really awesome to be able to give them a career path. Sometimes people in BIM don't always see a direct career path like engineers or architects do. So giving them a place to grow, take more responsibility, and they all have hearts of teachers. They love mentoring, they love helping people, they love talking to people. So really great to find that skill set.
And that's probably a benefit too of any large firm really, is that you have like, I don't know what, I haven't done the statistic, but like the super user, you know, people who are really interested in this, what percentage? Maybe it's 5% in a firm, but if you have, you know, 100 people, 10, you know, 1,000 people, 2,000 people, you're going to have a much bigger pool to draw
And people came out of the woodwork. There were some people that surprised me, and I'm like, yeah, come join us. Like, you're clearly bored, and this is going to be fun, right? We can have some fun.
Yeah.
We had a retreat, we had beach balls, it was cool.
So part of that development process too, though, and dealing with support is the 70-30 rule.
Yeah, and you know, just because you write a script, it doesn't end. I mean, writing the script's the cool part, and then getting people to use it and educating them, you're going to spend most of your time doing that.
Yeah, so 30% developing, 70% support, which I think is realistic in my experience as well, as much as you don't really want to think about that, you know, that you're going to be spending, or you're going to have to find people who can help you support that 70%. But I think it's, as far as accounting, when you're thinking about, okay, we want to do this, or any sort of custom tool development, that's a pretty good number to keep track of.
And it's a rule that I have to keep relearning.
Yeah. Right. Because you're thinking too, like, oh, I want to do this.
Yeah.
Well, what's the cost?
Exactly, and then there's a lens that I look through as a person. I think all of us in the room would feel the same way. We love cool new stuff, right? Like you guys love tech. You get something, a cool new script, and you want to tear into it. That is not the way the majority of our users are. So having to remind myself to look through their lens instead, and how they see that script, something new, something scary, something different. It broke one time, now they never want to use it again. Well, I got to come in and make them use the script.
Right, yeah, and that, but again, that you've gotta, you don't wanna think about that 70% of the time. I'm thinking about it, I'm like, oh, it's so true, but I really don't want it to be true,
Yeah.
but it is, so.
This one will be different.
Yeah. It'll be perfect, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so part 2 is building user interfaces. So if you're going to develop these tools, particularly in Dynamo, like Dynamo is great, but it's either A, hard for new users to know how to use, so I have to open up this file, and then what do I click? And then I want to change this, what do I do? Or you have users who open up the file and say, how can I monkey, or how can I screw this up? I mean, they're not saying that, but they're going to do stuff that's going to, you know, make things happen that you don't want to happen. And that's great when you're doing other tool development, if you're building add-ins. We were talking about Revit before, where you can build a user interface that's self-contained, so you don't have to like open up the hood of your car. I always think about Dynamo, it's like that, I had a slide, you know, it's like that build your own alarm clock kit. You know, like some people just want to tell the time, they don't want to see all the wires and stuff. Dynamo lets you see the wires, for better or worse. Yeah, literally, exactly, yeah. And then you have Dynamo Player. Anybody love Dynamo Player?
Oh.
It's okay. I think that's kind of it. It's 80%
Yeah.
what you want it to be. And
Anybody know how to alphabetize Dynamo Player? I'm just gonna throw that out. Anybody? No? Okay.
It's like the #1 complaint from our users. That we have a whole bunch of, we're an engineering firm, so we have a whole bunch of engineers that are A-type. So why isn't the script that's named A up on top? So they have a hard time going to the upper search function and actually typing it in. That seems a little bit too much for some users, so take that with
it should just be
Yeah.
alphabetic. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
So the way around this is to build user interfaces.
Yeah, so like we started building in 16 and Dynamo Player wasn't out yet, so we had all our users actually going into the spaghetti mess. And that, we learned very, very quickly that was a no-go. It was definitely a no-go. And we had users, like we said, that, oh my God, what is this mess? Where do I put the inputs, all this stuff? And then we had users that were like, oh, well, let me just disconnect this wire and move it here, and what does it do? And then, meanwhile, this is on our network, so all of a sudden the script goes down, right? So it's a complete mess, and now I'm in it trying to figure out what the heck happened, or do I just pull it from back up, or whatever. But yeah, so I found data shapes, and it changed the approach, and it changed what we could do 100%, and we'll get into that.
Yeah, and that was when we were talking last year, I'm like, so how are you doing, like, how are you building these scripts? And you're like, data shapes. And I was like, yeah, of course. You know, and I haven't, there's a lot of nodes in data shapes, and I was like, oh man, I don't know if I really want to get into that. But it was encouraging to hear, like, that is a good way to solve one of those issues with Dynamo, is to just build an interface in it. And there are tools, you know, that are provided for it. So here's one of the interfaces, one of John's interfaces.
Well, actually, that's actually Michael's align macro in Dynamo. So,
your interface looks better, though.
I'm sorry. I
But I think that, again, from a user perspective, they can just go to Dynamo Player, hit play, and this is how they're then going to interact with that tool.
Yeah.
And that makes it a lot easier.
Just the functionality of being able to build in drop-downs, which users are used to interacting with. The checkboxes are all controlled just the way you know, control, shift, multi-select, all of that. We can add the select all and select none radio buttons. Made it a lot easier for users to start to really, more intuitive for them to understand it. And then being able to incorporate the tooltips and the help at the bottom, which we'll talk about in a little more detail later. It adds consistency to it. Every interface they look at has the same kind of features, so they start to know what to look for. Every script hopefully gets a little bit better. Maybe the next script only needs 68%.
Yeah, and I was thinking exactly that.
Yeah.
Like, if there are ways that you can provide support, and we will talk about this, but at the point of use, you can potentially get your support cost down a lot lower. So I do like that, the incorporation. And for tools, I haven't never done that. And I'm like, okay, Brian, maybe I should do that. But like tooltips, I thought that's a great move right there. So here's what it looks like under the hood. And you can see, it's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, and 5-minute Google search. We're not going to get into every node here, but Google it, you'll find it. It's a great package. And what I do, because this is a lot of work to build every time, I just save this. I have a template that I built that's very generic, and each time I set one up, I just bring it in, and off we go. So if you set it up once, you can constantly modify it and add on as you need.
Yeah, and I think that's a great development tip too, because imagine a lot of the interfaces, and this is true any interface. We were talking about this morning, like I hate building interfaces, but having a template in place where now I'm just editing the inputs. And I would imagine too, you're gonna have similar types of interfaces for tools, even though the tool may be different, the interface could be similar. Like you have a drop down, you have a list box, and so on and so forth. So ways that you can speed up that development process, obviously, is gonna help any bit. So John wanted to give a shout out to his Dynamo heroes.
Yeah, these guys are pretty cool. They put the work in. I mean, I just wanted to just put these guys up as, we didn't do the development. They did. We just took what they did and put it in a line and optimized it. So, and also, if you guys want to research some more, I put their links up there, so you guys can track them down. And if you got questions, Mustafa, I've in constant contact with him. And Dynaslack, I think he presented, was he here? I think he was here Thursday. He presented on a new package that he dropped called AI, which is really cool.
Yep. And that's too, one of the strengths of the Dynamo community is that you have people who are, they're just putting this stuff out there. And they're available that you can ask them for help. And that, again, that's a huge benefit to Dynamo, for sure. So a couple tips, or a few tips anyways, if you're building interfaces. We've already talked about Dynashapes, just do that, use Dynashapes. But also don't make it too complicated. So again, you think about, I think that, you want some empathy towards the user, like they're gonna have to use it. So if how many have used a UI or a dialog box and you're like, what is this? I mean, yeah, like last week I was doing that, Wait a minute, you worked together. But keep it simple, as simple as you can, for sure. And again, I love this idea about the tooltips and having links to training. So certainly users are gonna have questions. They're always gonna have, if there's one guarantee, taxes and questions from users. But make it easy for them to help themselves. Because I'm sure they don't want to pick up the phone or they don't want to send an email. So having that training at point of use will save you 10% even, yeah. And this last one, include gifts at the end. This is big.
Yeah.
Like this, in fact. So, but I think the point here is that you want to make it easy. Is it working? Oh, hold on. I think I have to do something. Oh, I hope it plays because it's the best part. But make it fun for the users, and you want to make it sort of an enjoyable process. Oh wait, I got it. This was my fault. I think I pressed play. I'll keep talking, and you tell me if something happens. But that. For the most part, we want to add as much as we can when we're developing custom tools. If we can make it a little bit more fun for users, just to give that a little surprise or an element of something. It's not working.
Exit out of your slide when you press play.
What's that?
Go to your.
Let me pull it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's nothing that brings me more joy than watching a stuffy Type A engineer laugh at a GIF of a kitten. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, here we go. There we go. Got it. Yeah. So again, though, any time that we can make something a lot more fun, and there are other people are going to object, and that's not professional. But we're developing tools, and like your firm culture, so you're going to know what's appropriate, what's inappropriate. But I think that the selling point really is the gift. Have a little entertainment.
This script that we're running in this little video right now, this is called Project Cleaner. We use this to make our models a little more lean. Basically deletes as much as we can possibly make it delete as quickly as possible. So we want to warn people, so that's where we put up that warning script. And this is the actual training view. So then it's going to flip over to another one. This is annotation remover, again, another one that just scrubs it real clean. This was another one that we thought, nobody's going to use this, but everybody uses it. It's weird. It just...
Because you get to see the dude.
Yeah, and the dude abides, so it's cool. And then one more example that we have here. I forget which one this is. Oh, this is...
It's the best one.
Yeah, obviously.
Well, you haven't seen all of them, Mike.
So part of the fun, if you give us a script idea, and it goes all the way through to GenPop, you pick the GIF.
So, incentivize.
Yeah, uh-huh.
But on
And we
top
don't
of
turn
that,
anybody down.
on top of that, we'll get into it later, but we do use the data to do like Dynamo of the month user, and we put them up on our company TV that's in every office. So and they usually get a coffee mug and maybe some cookies from Sarah. But yeah, there is some bragging rights that we do use the data for.
Question?
What was that last graph that you had running with like a general notes?
Yeah, so for the structural team has a lot of notes that they pre-built in for all the materials that they do, and that script just opens up checkboxes that they can really quickly delete out what they don't want. So we're driving that towards our engineers to not have to put together a markup if they can't get in Revit. They just push play and decide what they want.
Okay, so I think that if you get anything about user, but two things. Use data shapes, add a GIF, right? Like that's kind of the highlights
Bottom
there.
line, if you take nothing else away, it's GIFs.
Right.
If you really dive into data shapes, you can add some music to it. So, if they have speakers and they're turned on and you put, AC/DC on it or something, it will just blare through the office. Not like I would know anything about that, but, so yeah, you could do some cool stuff with that package.
That's probably still an alpha, right?
Maybe.
That's a personal collection. So the third part is centralizing access. So again, maybe you have one office, maybe you have 2, 5, 10, 40. How do you make sure that everybody is using the same library? How do you make sure too that people aren't going in there and screwing things up? I think this is, for me, this was the big question I had. I was really curious about how you do that. So
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously this is kind of, the tricky part. We've made all this cool stuff. How do we actually get it in our users' hands? And we struggled. This was hard, and this is especially where I'm going to tell you that this is our story, and we're curious what other people have been able to put together as a solution. And full disclosure, I have a fantastic IT department. That has been a huge benefit to making this happen. We have worked very closely together. They're very tired of the word Dynamo, but they continue helping us get it out there. All of our GenPop scripts, they are an essential location on our network, so everybody points to the same location for the scripts. That's done. Easy peasy, right? The packages, however, prove to be a much bigger challenge.
yeah, we're gonna talk about that.
We'll get into that.
But I also like too, Dynamo's great because you can customize it, you can write your own code. However, and this is John's hit by a bus theory.
Yeah, so right now I'm the only one that knows the Dynamos in and out. That's what I do every day. Sarah has warned me a lot. Do not get hit by a bus and or leave, or I will find you and drag you back. Yeah. So keep that in the back of your mind when you're starting to get into this stuff.
And I think, in the back.
Is network latency an issue at all?
For the packages, yes. Yeah, for the scripts, we haven't had as much of a problem, very little problems. But for the packages, yeah, that's where we got really burned.
Yeah, because we keep all of our, anything we work on Dynamo that we want to distribute is on a centralized server, but our office is in Toronto, the server's located in Vancouver.
Yeah.
So it does take it's a small amount of time, but still, sometimes it's a significant amount of time that it causes Dynamo to crash.
Yeah, absolutely. We haven't, like I said, with the scripts, our latency is just low enough that we haven't had crashes. But with the packages, we originally had the packages in a centralized location, and we had everybody in those, and that's where we had crashes. So we had to pivot, if you will.
We aborted very quickly.
Yeah, well, and actually not quickly enough.
And we're going to talk about that,
Yeah.
that process to go through that. Is this one a video or is this?
No, that's just Player.
So yeah, and just a shot of Player, which is unalphabetized. But
Whatever order it wanted to be in that day.
so question though for you guys, you have one library. right? Now it's not, you don't have separate libraries for different types of scripts.
Yeah, and we've talked about that too, but in the end, the decision was to keep it all in one big dump, for lack of a better word, because even having our users navigate to multiple locations was difficult. So we thought, well, let's pull structural, let's give them their own folder, let's put mechanical over here, let's come up with a naming convention that helps it. But you can't alphabetize it, so naming convention isn't going to help us very much. And forcing the users to jump between folders is really difficult. So we really focus a lot on teaching the filter tool to help people navigate through the scripts.
Question in the back.
You have, I assume you have like an alpha and beta separate location?
That is
for
correct.
those? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And our beta users are sophisticated enough that they can jump back and forth.
A simple solution to that is I just create a TXT and I send that out to the group and it has all the links. So when you do go to that big left folder up there, they just copy paste and they're back. And so you can just, they can navigate the player a lot easier that way.
So John, though, when you guys started this process in 2017, there was no player.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so no player. So we had people going, like we said, going into the scripts, and like we talked earlier, that was a big mess. So we had scripts out there, and we stopped all alpha, all beta, and we took the copies off, and we rewrote them for data shapes when we found data shapes because it was just the solution. So we halted for it took 6 months. I was still on production at that time, so it was work 4 hours here, work on a script, go back to whatever I needed to do. So it was a process. It took about 6 months, but it was totally worth it. And then once we had it, then it was forward march from there.
Absolutely. Having a barrier between our graph and what I like to call our supervillain engineers, critical.
Yeah, yeah. Question?
Have y'all looked into using Dynamo browser, the add-in? Because that basically predated before
Yeah.
the plan.
Yeah, we did, and for reasons for installment and all that stuff, like we'll batch install, we just weren't there at that time.
Okay.
So we just kept it in. We kept it in Dynamo Player, then Data Shapes came along, and it was like, okay, well,
Yeah.
we don't need it anymore.
I found it really useful to use it because I can have like a centralized location, which I still use with some network latency, but at least for the scripts, that's all it's looking for. It'll make you know, your toolbars and your buttons and everything, and then you click on that, you get a user interface. So it looks almost like it's a developed add-in, but it's all Dynamo based, and every time somebody reopens Revit, it pulls up the latest, or you can path it to like an alpha beta.
Yeah, so, you know, like, different ways, right? It all depends on your user, on the end user, so, yeah. We're still thinking about doing the add-in toolbar, but obviously there's hurdles there too, so.
I think the way that you're using the player, like you're using it, and we talked about how it's 80%, like it gets you just enough there, but you just need that 80%. Like it's enough. Granted, it's not alphabetized, and you can't, you know, organize things in folders. Like there are issues, but it's good enough, I think. And clearly, it's working.
It's working.
So yeah, and it really player is just the container that gives people access to it. But I do think on a user perspective, like all I have to do is search through this and then press play, and then, you know, and then go through. Like you can develop tools once they migrate over, as long as they're in the right folder, they're good to go. And so training a user how to run a script isn't that difficult because it's fairly standardized and you're using sort of out-of-the-box components to do it. Yeah. Okay, so this is
About the packages. So obviously, we got to get the packages in everybody's hands. They got to have the same packages. When John finds a new package, we got to get him that too. So that's kind of my biggest piece in the process. Our goals for getting our packages to our users, first and foremost, it has to be so easy to add them. The packages is almost the delay of getting cool scripts out there, is how do we get the right packages on people's C drives. And if we missed the mark, like I did last time, a script got just ahead of a package that people needed, they were so psyched to use it, and it didn't run. And it's like everybody gets frustrated. It's, this was going to be so awesome. We were going to have a good rollout this time. So being able to add the packages simply was one of our biggest goals. How do we solve this problem? We also try to keep our single source of truth. Seems to be a really big buzzword this year, which I love. I love everybody looking to this. We don't want copies of copies of copies, especially when you've got 20,000 tiny little files that you're trying to, chase after. We also wanted to be able to version it. We wanted to be able to keep track of when we added packages and what scripts they affected. Really helpful for troubleshooting. And validation. When we got up to 1,200 people, knowing who had them and who didn't was critical. I did not want to march to every single desk and check their computers. I needed to be able to do it a little more automatically. And it needs to be transparent to the user. Users don't want to have to set this up themselves. We need to be able to do it for them. And finally, stable. So that's where the latency came in for us. So here's the options that we went by. First, we tried to put them in a common location. Obviously, we had some trouble with that. We tried batch files, we tried group policy, and we also tried deployment. So we're going to walk through each one of these. So the first one we tried was to save the packages in a common location. This seems like the most obvious solution, right? Because it's easy to add them, obviously. Anytime John has new packages, he just loads them up. He has write access. He doesn't even need to call me. Then that's our one source of truth as well. And, of course, the user doesn't even know that they get added. But we had crashes. So for that reason, deal breaker.
When did you have crashes? Do you know what the circumstances were?
Yeah, it's like when users were running them too close together.
So multiple users hitting the same package at the same time.
Yeah, it's like they were locking them. So that's when we thought, maybe it's because they have write access. Let's just take away write access. But we still had the exact same problem. It also created a complicated permissions tree for IT to handle for us. And John still had write access. He's the #1 Dynamo user in the firm, so he's still locking them out. So, deal breaker.
So option 3.
Moving down the line. So then we thought, all right, we're going to C drives. We're just going to give everybody their own copy of the packages. So this was nice. We created a little batch file that automatically copied for them. So this was good because it took IT out of the equation for us. We could kind of manage it on our own, and we didn't have to bother them.
Question about this though, would this happen at startup, or,
No.
so you would have to then contact users and say, hey, we have a new package, you need to update.
You see the problem. So the first time we did it, it's like, awesome, we're all set, we're on our way, we've got our packages, we're good. Oh wait, we need another package. And now the user has to go through and redo that process, run it again. If they don't want to do it, if they don't want to double click on something, they can't run the scripts, they're frustrated, they stop using it. So anything that requires heavy user involvement, deal breaker. And then of course with this too, we lost our validation. I did not know if my user had double clicked it. I didn't know if they had the right packages on their computer.
Or did it even at all? And if they didn't do it, well, guess what? Ring, ring. Hey, my stuff's not working. Why not? No, guess what? You're just half an hour down the rabbit hole. So it was just a bad vicious circle that we wanted to stay.
Yeah, the amount of time I spent pushing users' fingers on their mouse to double click that file. Yep, so deal breaker. So then we went back to IT. Okay, what options do we have here? And the first thing came back with was group policy. Let's just make a policy that gets these to their desktop automatically. So again, we're back to that easy to add packages, one source of truth. Every time someone reboots, they're just going to get the latest and greatest. Super quick to get that out. User doesn't have to mess with it. Really easy to validate. IT is now in charge of that. Awesome. However, we now had 5 or 6 people in the room that all had to put their little key code in the nuclear missile to release another package.
At the same time.
So this one was?
Yeah, for the same reason, deal breaker. And then of course too, because the sheer number of the files that we were having to move over, a reboot was going to take a really long time. It wasn't just one little file you're copying. But I will add about this, we did leave on group policy our Dynamo settings.xml that paths to the packages for them and the player network location.
Which brings us to?
An SCCM deployment that copies our packages. So our IT builds this for us, and it again, back to one source of truth. The user has no idea, no involvement. IT can version it. So I include with our deployment a little TXT file that says what packages I sent, what day I sent it, what version of Dynamo we're on, and they can validate. They can run reports that tell me who's installed it, who has it, who's failing. The problem, again, we're back to everybody with that nuclear code. We have to take a lot of time to add it. This is the thing that delays us the most with our packages. But still, it was the best solution we could come up with.
Okay, any takers about how long it took us to figure this out? About 6 months. 6 months, so
It's not an easy process.
it's not an easy task. It's a lot of swing and misses for sure.
But I think the point too is that there's a lot of players who need to get involved. However, there's a lot of expertise that is available. And we talked about this morning, how, IT can be a really great resource. They can also be, an enemy.
And like us, they're understaffed too, and they've got a lot of people hitting them for stuff, so.
This is another thing that you're putting
We're
on
adding
top.
it to it, and we don't tell them, I don't tell them a month in advance that I'm gonna need new packages sent, it's like,
They just wait for the angry email from me.
Yeah.
That's how it is.
So question though, how do you, that process, at some point I would imagine the package list, and we'll show you the package list, but that will stabilize. But I guess though, every time there's an update, you have to push out a new deployment.
So we have a lot of Dynamo users in here. We all know the problem for 1.32 and 2.0, right? So that's where we're heading currently. We're currently all on 1.32. And I do have my 2.0 stash, but we're not ready to push yet. So yeah, so just throwing that out there. You have to keep that in consideration when you're doing this stuff too. Yeah.
You guys looked into symbolic links to folders on network location? Does that help with locking files?
I haven't personally looked into it, but now I will. Anybody in the room done that?
No, but I do have all the packages on the network location. Haven't had the crashing problem. That either may be that we don't have enough users using that yet, or that nobody has write rights to that folder. I mean, I do technically, but I do all of my development of my local, and my any file points to mine, and then everybody else's any files points to the network. And I wrote a PowerShell to edit the any files of users without overwriting anything that they already had in it.
Yeah.
So the only thing that really changes in the any file is the custom packages folder path.
That's a good solution. I mean, I can tell you the symptoms that we had when everybody had the packages in the same location. Someone would hit them, and it was like they locked the files, and 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 6.5 minutes, nobody could run the same folder or the same script. They would run it, and it would just spin and spin and spin, and the only way out was to force close Revit, which is no fun, because half my users wouldn't sync before they ran the script. So no way to predict it, and the frustration level was so high, and we were so early in the deployment process, we couldn't have it. We were losing the excitement that we had built for it, and so we had to pivot.
I wonder though if it's a critical mass problem, like at some point you will reach a critical mass of users where you have that concurrent issue, for sure. That's a question in the back, and then we'll come to the
Is
front.
there an approximate number of packages you have to deploy?
We have the list is on the next slide.
Let's go to the list, yeah.
There's
I think
a
there's
list.
20.
It's about the same.
Yeah, we've expanded because our initiatives are forcing me to expand a little bit. But this is the general list. This is what's out to users right now, except for Monocle.
Can I do another push?
Not yet. Maybe next week. But the typical staples are up there. Obviously, there's some that if you got questions on, we can talk about afterwards and what I use them for. But obviously, Rhythm, Arculab, Data Shapes, Dynaslack, Biomorph. I use Biomorph all the time. Clockwork is another one. So yeah, these are the staples.
And I think this goes back to the best part and the worst part about Dynamo, especially when you're deploying it, is dealing with this issue. Is there, now, for you, John, do you have, are you hesitant to add a new package?
Yeah, definitely. And that kind of gets into, Dynamo's great, the open source is great, but again, open source is sometimes not great. So, what if Dynaslack doesn't want to update for 2.0? You're kind of locked into him and his decision making. So, and that's the risk when we're all running firms. That's what you kind of have to think about. Do we want to put a tool or package tools like this up and send them out on an open source tool on an open source platform?
Because you don't necessarily, you may not get support. They may not want to do it anymore. I mean, some of these, and you hope a lot of these are going to stick around, but there's no financial incentive.
Yeah, and then actually, I think that would be the next step for the developers out there, is put it on a platform that I would pay for a subscription.
Oh, yeah, if you know you're gonna get support. A very reasonably priced.
Reasonably priced, yeah.
No, question?
Obviously, there's a time commitment to it, but have you done anything where you like reverse engineer a package and break out pieces you want?
Oh, yeah, we're definitely thinking about that.
Just for stability, I mean,
Yeah.
our users are getting so used to these scripts, the time savings are so significant, when they go down, it's really obvious.
I mean, Stan's like, I'm sure you guys are reverse engineering that stuff too, right? Yeah, sure.
It's a secret.
There's also the node to code.
Yeah, but then the burden is on you, and then you have to then support it. And so it's like, again, Dynamo's great because somebody else developed this node. And then if you start, having to worry about that, or you get hit by a bus, then.
John doesn't cross the street.
Yeah, he does.
Question? Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
I was just, yeah.
You mentioned that the time it takes to send out all the all the packages again. I use Prism Deploy, and I've been using it for just about everything, all the Autodesk stuff.
What was the name of it?
Prism Deploy.
Okay, Prism Deploy.
And you build a package,
Yeah.
different kind of package, but
Right.
in Prism Deploy, and then you can apply it to users. And one of the nice things is there are settings so that you can have it either only overwrite older files, or only deploy changed files, or new files.
Yeah, for the recording and for the users who've
So
been
that
here.
makes it really quick.
There's a
Right.
Prism Deploy tool that makes it really easy to deploy. So when I do a deployment, I have to put together, here's what a validation to prove that it's done, what users we want to send it to. I have to put all the packages together in a nice, neat little folder, and then I have to handle that to IT so they can build their side. We always beta test. Whenever I push go to 1,200 users, I don't do it blind. I have to beta test it, and then I go around and check and make sure it worked perfectly on everybody's machine. And then we push go, and you just sit there in front of your computer and watch those support tickets.
Right.
Oh, it's fine.
But it's no small feat, and I can see too, like, oh, there's this great package. But what is it gonna cost me in terms of time to get this, to build it into the script? Again, like 30/70,
Yeah, it's about, from when we initialize, or when we say we're gonna update it takes about a week and a half
To get it all the way
the whole way out.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But you're also too, again, open source, because I've had nodes disappear on me as part of that. I'm sure everybody that's always not a lot of fun that. So that's part of, again, the good and bad.
Have you had any users take on and install their own packages that are on this list that have gone and done their own thing, which end up breaking one of these?
Hopefully at that point, it's enough of a power user that they would understand the risks of that. I could probably count on one hand the users that we have that would do it.
Install their own package
Yeah.
instead of your deployment.
Yeah, and or overwrite it. In that situation, I might ask them to put those packages in a different spot, and they just have their own cache
They would
that's
bring
different
that.
from
Yeah.
GenPop, yeah.
Mhm.
And if they're smart enough to go get packages, hopefully they're smart enough to update their settings.
Well, you can also, with the custom packages folder, it can have more than one path, and they're hierarchical, so.
Right.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a question, yeah.
Somewhat related though, what is your guys' workflow for when the package update does come out, and maybe some node changed, but we don't really know what it was, and it's like nested inside a node, and you have to go through your scripts? Do you guys have like a process?
I just do a full overwrite, like here's the fresh set, blam.
Yeah,
So-
but like, let's say a node slightly changes, maybe the input changes, or how it outputs, the format changes, or it's something that's like not really noticeable. You guys don't just go through script by script every time it's a package update?
Welcome to my life.
This is why you're full-time.
That's why I'm
essentially what I do, is I
full-time.
go,
Yeah.
script by script by script.
It can be a nightmare to do that for sure. And so it's really nice that when they do update a package, the documentation to come with it is pertinent. Like, you need that information, or you're just going down a rabbit hole. And unfortunately, it is connected. So if they do update it, and you're using it and you break, well, now they're live scripts. I mean, we use these every day. So you're in panic mode. I mean, I was on vacation once, and we had this happen, and I get not like one call, I had 5 calls from Sarah, and a text message, and an email, and a Teams.
I blacked out that day. I forgot that it happened.
Well, July 14th of 17.
But you know, if you're getting 5 calls from Sarah, that means she's probably getting like.
It was actually the ArchiLab package that you updated.
Oh, yeah.
That,
Yeah, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
It happened in, was it in 18 he updated it? I believe it was in 18 he updated it. It was some massive change, but you didn't have any documentation on it, which, yeah.
It was tough.
Yeah, it was tough.
That's when I
tough
had
change.
notes just drop off. It's
Yeah.
like,
That's so nice.
yeah.
And it's-
We can
it's-
talk about that.
It's like a slow train wreck. Like you get one email and you're like, huh. Then you get 2, you're like, uh-oh. And then now you have 20 and you're like, uh-oh. This is a
Better
pattern.
call. Yeah.
Again, that's again, when you're going through this process and you're gonna go all in on Dynamo, you have to think about that and how you're gonna handle that kind of
So,
situation.
John, do you have any documentation that, so you know which
Yeah.
packages are in?
Yeah,
those?
so the Monocle package right there, it's a lifesaver for me.
Does anybody use Monocle?
It's John Pearson's package.
Yeah,
if you
it's-
guys know. It's
it is
really
great.
awesome.
It's an extension to Dynamo, so it's not a node, but it goes in the ribbon. But I like it because it will, you can list out all the packages and versions in a particular node. So it's really cool.
I would highly recommend.
Yeah.
Highly recommend
Same
that.
here. Okay. So we've got about 20 minutes left. So this was the question, how do you collect user data? And for me, this was the one piece when I was talking to you guys, like this is what I wanted to know. How are you doing? Part of this is like knowing what users are doing, knowing what they're using, like this is super, super valuable. Knowing who's using what, when they use it. And part of this though is if you're gonna try to support an initiative to roll Dynamo out in any size firm, having some metrics so that you can go to firm leadership and say, here's how many people are using it. I think you guys even calculate like the time savings, if you can put that
Yeah,
together.
we try to make an estimate just for argument's sake, to put some real data,
Right.
metrics on it.
Yeah, but I think to be able to develop, have somebody who's full-time on this, to get the support staff, you need something. So this was the bit that I wanted to know.
Yeah, so when we started doing this stuff, it's like, okay, that's great, but I don't know what's being used. Like that's the chunk, right? Like, yeah, you can spend all this time developing a Dynamo, but if it's not, no one's using it, what is it worth to your company? So I stumbled across Dynaslack. I was on the forums, searching, and there's so many ways. I just want to preface it. There's so many ways to do this, but we were looking for something that wasn't heavy labor, heavy database. IT's got to be involved. Oh, IT involved. No. So like we were looking for something. So we were looking for something really, really nimble. And I stumbled across Dynaslack. I was like, what is this? And I started getting into it and reading it. I'm like, oh my god, there we go. So I started building it, and it's really cool. I recommend looking at it as an option for you guys if you wanted to do this. This is the guts. It looks kind of messy, but once you start taking bit by bit and start figuring out what it's actually doing, it's quite useful. It involves webhooks. So this is another reason why we went this way, is we have offices in other countries across water. So how do I, right, how do I monitor that? So the webhook, a script can be used anywhere. As long as there's an internet connection, it's going to be the database.
It's also useful because we can see when one of our scripts blocks.
Yeah.
Because it works, if you're connected to the internet, you'll hear about it.
So, and essentially, I'll show, actually, this is what it looks like in Slack, but I'm not gonna press the video.
It's okay, it's okay.
But I think there's really 2 parts to this, is one is getting real-time usage, like who's using what when, being able to see that in real time, and then being able to extract that data into some format, like spreadsheets, or being able to extract it into Excel. So this really blew my mind, and I told you guys I was going to gush a bit about it, but I think that like using Slack as a way to collect, or at least to collect all that user data, then you're not relying on like writing out TXT files. You're not using a back-end database. You're using an off-the-shelf tool. So every time somebody hits a script, it populates. We have a video that shows sort of real time, but you're seeing what's happening as it's happening. And I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, so it gives you username. So that makes it really fun for me to change my username and trick them sometimes. what? So it'll give username, it'll give the script, give the date and the time, and it's super easy to export as a JSON or an XML or whatever. Get it into Excel, create a pivot table, and you're off and running. Long term, it'd be pretty cool to build a dashboard out with it, but we just haven't gotten to that level yet. I take this data and I put a report together quarterly that anybody in the company can see. We track what's the most popular scripts. We can use it to drive training if we have a script that we think is really important and not getting used, if it got missed in the training. If we have a script that we're surprised turned out to be really useful, for example, we have one called drawn by check by. It's literally adding the drawn by or check by value. Like the easiest thing in the world to do in Revit, right? We're like, who's gonna use this? It's like number 3.
I wrote it as a joke.
The engineers love it. It's just little stuff, you know.
But you wouldn't know that, you know,
No,
unless you were
until-
collecting this data.
So when we go to different offices and we're doing education on that, it's the #1 script that comes up by engineers, because it's just, you know, what if you have a VDCs or SVDCs or anyone that's in the model all the time knows they can go to the browser, grab all the sheets, and then there's your properties, right? But an engineer that just wants to get it done, they don't want to do all that. You might have 1,000 sheets to grab, so.
That's 2 clicks.
Right.
That's too much.
So yeah, drawn by check by was written as a joke, and it's probably one of our popular scripts.
And another interesting that's happened from this data too, outside of just being able to see what's used, drive education, there's other pieces of information that you can pull out of this. So for example, we have some scripts that people use every time they complete a certain action. For example, we get a new model from one of our clients and we have to clean it up. We have scripts that they use every time. Well, now I know how many models we update in a day. So if it's you know, 1 million, that's a process we should focus on to try to make more efficient. If it's 2, I should put my energy elsewhere. So there's other patterns that I wasn't expecting that have emerged that we've been able to use to drive our development in certain directions.
I think that's a good point, because you're building tools to make common processes easier, and then you can use that data to get a better sense about what's happening with 40 offices that you're not going to know.
And it's surprising what they are. We have our 2 big scripts is printing and project cleaning. That's it. I mean, they're over 1,000 times a month being used. So, and then some that we've written like, oh, that's going to be big, crickets. So.
And you know that. It's not just I think, but it's I know, because for better or worse, you know.
Yeah, that's proof.
So just to go back.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Really quickly. There are lots of add-ins already developed that are doing most of those things. What's your decision process? Should I just purchase add-ins and not to deal with the packages and updates because it's coming from, you know, respectable designers? Or should I develop my script? What's the decision process? What's your base?
My thought on it is users like consistency in the tools that they use. So if we end up building it into Dynamo, they're used to all the Dynamos have the same kind of feel to them, whereas add-ins are going to feel a little different, so sometimes it's harder to train. If it's something that people are doing a lot, we'd push them towards Dynamo, you know, because we can do that in-house. We don't have to worry about updates. And yeah, if Dynamo can do it, we'd like, I think our rule is if Revit can do it, Revit. If Revit can't, Dynamo. If Dynamo can't, add in.
Yeah. But I would go too that the benefit to you too is just getting that data.
Yeah, and the third-party stuff too, like, you know, you don't collect that data, like Michael just said, and you're waiting on them to update it. So like if there's a change for a Revit version, we've run into that on some of our tools that we've stalled push out on Revit because the toolbar, the add-ins aren't ready yet. But we're a little bit more nimble, and I can just kind of drop everything and get that ready for our process. So again, this is what we do, and if it fits better for what you guys are doing, then have at it, but, you know.
Questions back?
I'd also comment on that it's just more things to install.
Right, yeah, so the comment was, yeah, there's more things to install. So maybe you have this add-in, this add-in, this add-in, you've got a collection of tools that you then need to support, update, install. Totally.
And for the end user, it gets kind of tricky. Okay, I need to run this, so what tool am I getting?
Right.
Where is it
located?
Where is it located?
Whole nother level of training, another level of push-outs.
Yeah.
And no data, so it's harder to justify it to management when I have to sign that check once a year.
What's the cost-benefit analysis for you guys building Dynamo scripts internally for those add-ins than purchasing?
That's a good question.
It's a very good question. It depends on the script, right? Some of the scripts that we have, there's no add-in for it, so your ROI is way better on it. Some scripts, like Drawn by Checkback,
There shouldn't be.
There shouldn't be any.
Saves them 10 seconds, but
Yeah.
it adds up to like 1 million hours in a
Like,
month.
I think that's something where you are able to export out to Excel, for example, and kind of bring it back in, right?
Yeah, so we have a script called PML 1 and 2, it does something similar
It's
to
like a
that.
round trip.
It's a round trip, but we, like I said, you get into a toolbar situation, it doesn't exactly work how you want it to work. And where Dynamo, we can get it exactly fit to how we want it to work.
It's ultra customized. Our parameters, you know.
So I like customization to our workflows, and earlier you sort of jokingly asked me, well, what is Stantec doing from a Dynamo perspective? And actually the answer is not much. Because, you're full-time doing this. I'm curious to know, at this point, would it have made more sense to say, John, go learn how to write C# and let's write actual Revit add-ins, because at the end of the day, writing your own add-ins avoids the risk around user interface and stability with packages.
How many classes have been sitting in during this session? I mean, it feels like that's where, I've sat in a lot of classes at BILT this year, and that seems like where everybody's at. Like, so do you use PyRevit? Do you write the C#? Do you stick with Dynamo? And again, there's no right answer to it. It's just whatever way the firm feels like going.
Yeah, and we started, this was an internal initiative between the two of us. We didn't tell our management we were doing this. We didn't have any buy-in from the top. They weren't giving us any tools. We were just
We just showed up with here you go.
doing whatever we could. And there's advantages to sticking with Dynamo. I mean, the flexibility of just being able to throw a script in that folder. 50 scripts on a toolbar might not be as useful either.
Yeah.
So, but pros and cons, this is just where we've gone so far.
I think as a rapid tool development platform, and I would put PyRevit in the same bucket. Whereas for an add-in, you're gonna have to update that installer all the time, you're gonna have to deploy that. Yeah, you could do it. I think that this is sort of it's almost an evolutionary story too. Like, we can come back in a couple years and it'll probably be a different story. But, yeah.
Yeah, I think for us, so similar to how you have this deployment process, we've kind of just added PyRevit on the end, and then we're now considering adding C# on the end, right? So Dynamo was great for that iterative process. You get in there and sit down and like poke around at it, and not, oh, watch me do this coding. But taking that as that next step progression is, it does tighten everything up, and you get the same kind of logging, and you get all those kinds of things. But it's something that I would suggest or offer up. It would be a good next step, and you can do it. You can learn it inside Dynamo. You can start doing your own little Python.
It almost comes into a tool as it's a concept tool now, right? And since you have it, it works.
Yeah.
Right? It's just converting it to C#, which might be a little tricky. Or,
No, and I'll do that when I'm developing add-ins. I will a lot of times prototype it in Dynamo, and then it's like, okay, and if it comes down to something that's computationally intensive, that makes sense to do it as a compiled, DLL file. I want to just go back real quick to the question about the ROI, and I think if you look at the cost, look at two costs. One is, your salary, basically, but your cost to the firm, and probably like part of your time, Sarah, versus what it would cost to buy licenses for 1,000 users for 5, 10, 15 different add-ins. I think you're way cheaper, I would say. So you probably need a raise.
do you want to come to Rock Island soon and say that?
Yeah, but honestly, you can do that math, and then you can look at the time saving. So not only is it cheaper to do that in-house, but then you're also saving it versus a benchmark of if you didn't have this. So I feel like I don't know, you'd have to really look at the numbers, but I think that's not a difficult argument to make at that scale.
The argument I would make too is even like you say, oh, well, there's free add-ins, that the management cost of all
It's
those
not
installers,
free.
which somebody was getting.
Absolutely.
And all the new, this guy got to do the licensing, this guy got to build the deployment, this guy's got to push them, this person has to troubleshoot all the failed ones.
Right. So really, that IT cost doesn't go away if you're buying off the shelf.
Anytime I make life easier for IT is a win.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Oh, sorry. The other thing is that you're mentioning that having somebody that's going to program your connection and have your own idea, basically. But I think the value of Dynamo, even if it's not perfect, and sometimes it's the same thing. You're either depending on the packages or you're either depending on the add-in that you're going to buy. And the value of Dynamo is democratizing the access to the tool.
That's a good
so
point. Yep.
if he gets, sorry.
Hit by a bus.
See,
It's okay.
we'll say,
Thank you.
you got on vacation, we'll
Yeah.
say, okay, instead of-
Yeah, go ahead.
So, at some point, Sarah is gonna be able to help, or some of your power users is gonna be able to help. So,
Yeah. That's a great point.
democratizing everything and not having also depending on one person, et cetera, because either if it's in house or outside.
Also,
always
if you're
depending on that.
taking good notes inside the script
Right.
and you're color coding the different functions and
We can go to a
functionality.
level, we PDF it out, and then I have all those notes and then right on top of it, and
Yep.
we have a
I
whole
put a
stash.
second stash
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
this, but they're all
Yeah.
saved.
No, I actually really like that point, though. You're building you're introducing computational design, you know, as a skill set that is approachable.
Yeah, I mean, think about,
Oh, no, sorry, there's a question in the back, but I want you to finish.
yeah, think about all the power users are gonna, at some point, starting to develop their own tools, and they're
Right.
gonna bring ideas, et cetera, so.
Yeah,
That's cool, right?
I think it's
look
better,
forward
it's
to it.
not perfect, but I
Right.
think it's better.
yeah. And that may be worth the cost of some lack of efficiency or, you know, like the price of Dynamo, for sure, yeah. There was a question in the back.
Yeah, so, a lot of times, we do use add-ins for most of our office-wide distributed tools, but then we use Dynamo mostly for project-specific tasks that no one else needs. Do you guys have any, like, documentation and standards for how to keep those consistent across the office?
The scripts?
Yeah, yeah.
So, when there's only like 2 people writing, it's pretty easy. But,
He
yeah,
keeps them neat.
I keep them
Does, to
neat.
his credit.
The spaghetti mess, it can happen, but when we go to push from beta to Gen Pop, I usually spend time with that script and kind of reorganize it, so if I do get hit by a bus and I annotate like crazy. I'm taking a word from John Pierce, if you don't annotate your graph, get out of here. Like, just leave it good for the next person if that next person has to go in.
I think the idea of a style guide, you know, a lot of times, you know, programmers are off, like, software companies will have a style guide for coding, and I think, you know, every office should develop some sort of style guide, or at least think about it, how are you gonna do color coding, notes, et cetera.
And to add on to that, I wouldn't do it in alpha or beta, because you're just wasting time at that point.
Right.
So I would just wait before you go into Gen Pop to clean it up and get it all pretty and looking and send it off the prism.
We have about 5 minutes, so.
Oh, cool, yeah.
I did actually want to say just real quick, one thing I think that is smart as well is basically grouping this, the data collection series of nodes, and then that just gets dropped into every script. I think easy,
Yeah.
efficient way to do it.
Yeah, and that's how we track our alpha and beta. If you see that node third up from the left, it says beta on it. I think it says beta. I can really see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's how I track through the database when stuff's getting. When we go to push the Gen Pop, that falls off, and then it's just its standard name. So that's another tip when you guys do this.
So you'll see it in Slack as data.
You'll see it in Slack as beta.
All right, so we're on the home stretch.
Yeah.
Training. Training, we were talking about, training is a slog, providing support is a slog. It's far more fun to write the scripts, you know, and figure that out. It's a lot more challenging than it is to do documentation. But, you know, that's the crucial point. And I think given a firm the size of IMEG, that stuff needs to be, you need to have that dialed in. Otherwise, the adoption rate is going to be a lot slower. It's going to be a lot more difficult.
Yeah. So every single script that we release has its own page on our SharePoint site. We put this together as part of when we have beta because our beta users are going to need it as well, and it's a good opportunity as they're finding mistakes for me to start, not mistakes, but issues or things that we need to document. So every single piece of training that we put together has the same components, so our users always are knowing what to look for consistently. First thing we list is before you run the script. A lot of the Dynamos have some stuff you have to kind of tee up a little bit to prepare, or you need like little reminders on, you know, if you have to set something or something has to be named a certain way that Dynamo's looking for. So nice little quick checklist for people before they run it. That's always going to be duplicated in the tooltip on the user interface, so multiple locations. Then we do step-by-step, 1, 2, 3, 4, for people who just want to read it real quickly. Every script also gets their own little video. It could be a minute long, could be 5 minutes long, could be 40 minutes long, but they all get a little video. And one thing I've learned, I used to be, when I started doing this, it was a huge burden to make these videos because I got to move my entire computer somewhere. Got to get somewhere quiet where my neighbor isn't opening a bag of chips or,
Right,
something
yeah,
that's gonna,
yeah.
you're in minute 24 of a 25-minute video and it all falls apart around you and you just start from scratch. So some of my videos don't even have audio. It's enough for me to just show the clicks, and that's okay. I can get them done a little more quickly. And then I find it's nice, sometimes I just show the video as part of my training rather than doing live demos.
Yeah,
Live
live
demos.
demos, we all raise our hands here, done.
Anybody have a live demo fail on them? Yeah,
Yeah.
Fall apart around you. But it's nice, you can just talk over the video. This is how you can expect it to work.
And I think that to show, don't, is a lot
Yeah.
more effective than tell.
And then the last piece that it's not on the screen clip, but I always do at the bottom, common troubleshooting. So every time a user calls me with an issue, I go back to this page and I add the solution. So I'm starting to keep track of that. Good for me, good for them.
And that's reducing your 70%. Yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully. So I like this too, going back to the interface design, but having some training information on the tool right there as somebody's using it. So having the tool tips and then linking right here to the actual page. So, and I think that going back to the question about buying add-ins off the shelf, there's consistency to this so that users know where they can get help, which I think is really useful. All right, so to wrap it up, these were our 5 key steps just to go through a development process. You don't have to call it general population if you don't like the prison analogy, but having some sort of formal process, super useful. User interface and being conscious of your users and where they're coming at, but making it easy for them to use the tool. Data shapes is a great way to do that. Centralizing your access. This, as Sarah and John said, this is how they are doing it, which is not necessarily the way to do it. It's going to depend on it, but it takes time. I think that's the key thing. And then collect as much user data as you can, because that's going to give you justification, that gives you ammunition, that gives you something to go to your firm leadership to say, yes, this is being used, and yes, this is money well spent. And then provide training.
And retrain.
Yeah,
and
I was going to say,
retrain.
can you overtrain? Maybe, but I think a lot of times I've heard research, it's like you need 5 to 7 touch points with people in order for something to actually sink in. So if you're dealing with technical subjects, it could be even more than that. So make it easy, make it harder for them to not follow the training, make it easy for them to follow it. So just end up, next steps. So what are you guys doing now?
Yeah, we've handled all the low-hanging fruit and what we consider low-hanging fruit. So we're looking at the generative design through Dynamo and all the tools available for that. Open source, I just want to touch open source is good, but as we talked about, and we're getting into more discipline specific, which is going to open up more users. So
obviously our perspective, we came up as just BIM people, we're not designers, we're not engineers, so the first step was a lot of stuff that made our lives easier, but now we're dragging engineers in the room.
And actually, it's we're learning a lot when you lock yourself in a room with an engineer. Things start.
It's totally true. I have an engineer who locks me in a room for 4 hours a week so I can work on his project.
Yeah.
And I think too that this took, what were we talking? We're in year 3 for you
Yeah,
guys,
almost
right?
year 3.
This took time, but it's not. You were able to do. You Google a lot, right? But you can figure this out, and it's certainly it's doable. But it takes collaboration, and it takes getting the right people in the right room. And I think you said this morning too, it wasn't always easy conversation.
No, it's not always easy conversation.
You guys have been working together for a while, so you
Long time,
developed.
yeah, a long time. So you got to have that relationship when you can exchange criticism and
Very openly.
move forward from it. Yeah.
Okay, so that's it for us. I think we went a couple minutes over, but certainly there's contact information. We're happy to hang out here. I think I was going to go to the speaker lounge. You were going to go to the bar.
I'll be at the bar if you want to talk to me.
John,
And I'll just go
He's
away.
going back to his developer janitor closet.
But thank you very much for being here. Thank you for listening.